To this esteemed panel, I'd like to turn the floor over to Matthew Edwards. Mr. Edwards is the Director of the Office of Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia at the U.S. Department of Commerce Foreign Commercial Service. He will be facilitating our conversation on the feasibility of future infrastructure projects in the region and promoting private sector engagement in these efforts. Mr. Edwards, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yevgen. Welcome to our panel on connectivity and infrastructure development, and thank you to all our panelists for sticking with us. It's without further ado, it's my honor to introduce our guest speaker, U.S. Department of Commerce Regional Senior Commercial Officer for Eurasia, Ms. Heather Burns. Ms. Burns is based at the American Embassy in Ankara, Turkey, from where she manages 6 of our department's offices across Turkey, Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, as well as partnering on trade promoting activities with American embassies in Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. And in this role, she works incredibly hard to advance U.S. economic and commercial relationships throughout Eurasia and to assist American companies who are looking to enter or expand in the region's markets. You have her biography in your conference materials, so I won't belabor that at length, but just know, please, that her previous assignments have included leading our department's commercial offices in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Accra, Ghana, as well as serving as a commercial attaché at our consulate in Johannesburg, South Africa. And I've been fortunate to be able to work alongside, as well as for Heather during most of the past 7 years. She's one of our most knowledgeable and results-oriented diplomats and leaders in our department, and we're very privileged to have her working in the Eurasia region and to be able to hear her thoughts today. Heather, over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Thank you to the Caspian Policy Center and the governments of Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkey, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan for the invitation to speak today. Despite the global pandemic that began last year, we've seen sustained U.S. company interest in the Caspian region. And the reasons for this are clear. This region represents a market with a diverse and growing population and with goods and services needs that range from agribusiness to aerospace. U.S. companies are uniquely positioned to offer high-quality, long-term solutions. To meet this interest, the Department of Commerce has maintained close working contact with our trading partners and our teams on the ground in Eurasia and in Washington, and we have worked together to organize a continual series of events to ensure that U.S. companies are aware of the latest market opportunities. Within the past few months alone, we've held events focusing on water technology in Central Asia, a Eurasian Ports and Rail Forum, and a higher education event with the government of Uzbekistan. Looking ahead, we're also organizing the U.S.-Turkey Hydrogen Forum next week, a Eurasian Beauty Sector event, June 22 to 23, and a Eurasian Green Energy Forum, July 7 to 8. The Commerce Department has partnered with business associations around the region and in Washington to organize a series of certified trade missions to Caspian countries. We had trade missions in 2015, 2017, 2018, and 2019, and we very much look forward to organizing further trade missions as the global health situation improves. As we will soon be approaching the 30th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations with many of the governments here today, we are reminded that U.S. companies have historically played and continue to play key roles in the development of the region's energy sector. We're also excited to see a number of governments in the region focus their efforts on diversifying their economies towards sectors of the future that offer increased employment opportunities, revenue, and a smaller carbon footprint. In part, these new economic opportunities will be achieved via the ability for goods, services, and information to move seamlessly across borders via reliable infrastructure, such as railways or through wireless communications technology. Many of the countries represented here today have made considerable investments in their connectivity infrastructure or have opened new channels of dialogue with their neighbors to collaborate on projects that will bring their countries closer to the larger consumer markets of Asia and Europe. This is no easy feat and will take time. Indeed, the United States has its own considerable backlog of infrastructure priorities. As someone who spends a good deal of my time speaking with companies, I think it's also important to consider what could be called the infrastructure within the infrastructure. So this can include things like e-verification systems for cargo at border crossings, streamlined paperwork processes, the ability to repatriate profits, and the willingness to work constructively with companies to solve challenges in a timely manner as they arise. Over the course of nearly 3 decades, US companies have had the opportunity to work with our Caspian region trading partners to help countries achieve their economic development goals. During that time, they have brought not only expertise to the countries in which they work, but importantly, they've also brought training programs, investment, and job opportunities that are vital for sustained economic growth. In Turkey, for example, US companies employ over 80,000 Turkish workers. Chevron, Kazakhstan's largest private investor, has noted that between 1993 and 2017, the company and its local partners spent more than $24 billion on Kazakhstani goods and services. These are just a few of the many examples of real investments American companies are making in the communities in which they work. For US company attendees watching this morning who would like to know more about the services offered by the US Commercial Service, or for governments or other entities interested in partnering with a US company, please feel free to reach out to me or anyone on my team. The event organizers will have my contact information available. I hope you look forward to the discussion for our second panel today as much as I do on Trans-Caspian connectivity and infrastructure development, where our panelists will address promotion of intra-regional connectivity and trade, safe transportation routes, and a roadmap to reopening, infrastructure development financing, best practices for creating strong institutional frameworks, and fostering private sector engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. As Heather noted, I think this is an exciting time to be discussing infrastructure development in the greater Caspian region. And of course, we've seen profound changes brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. This is not unique to the Caspian region, but it has raised questions such as how do we best work with our neighbors to ensure that goods can continue to move swiftly to their destinations despite unprecedented limits on travel by people? And how do we make sound investments in our infrastructure in a timely way so that our citizens and businesses have the reliable internet connectivity that has proven so vital to modern life and to our ability to sustain economies during this sort of public health emergency? But we also still face questions that did not begin nor end with the pandemic. How do we address dangers posed by climate change? How do we keep the internet secure from those who would wish to misuse it? And how do we ensure that regulations and laws governing trade and investment are applied even-handedly and transparently and can be readily identified and understood across borders? So we know that infrastructure investment and innovation will be critical to the recovery of economies in the Caspian and around the world. A cornerstone of that post-COVID recovery will be a robust commitment to connectivity and infrastructure development. So within that context, I'm very happy to be able to introduce a varied and tremendously distinguished panel of speakers to share their thoughts. We have with us representatives of various governments, commercial entities, seaports, non-governmental organizations, and even a representative of the financial community. So I'll introduce each of them in turn as they speak, and we will take questions from the audience after all of the speakers have finished their comments. So to our panel members, some of the topics I hope you can address in your remarks are, first, what do you see as the most important short-term and long-term priorities and opportunities for infrastructure and connectivity in your respective countries and enterprises? What are the foremost challenges for realizing those priorities? And where do you believe that financing will or should come from to help realize those projects? Of course, from a U.S. perspective, we're also very interested in the subject of what role can American businesses, as well as the private sector more broadly, play in developing infrastructure in the greater Caspian region. So I'll remind everyone just to please speak at a measured pace for our interpreters. And without further ado, I will proceed to invite our first speaker, Odilbek Isakov, the Deputy Minister of Finance for the Republic of Uzbekistan.
Many thanks, Edward, and many thanks for Caspian Policy Center for inviting us in this to this important forum. And truly, connectivity and infrastructure development is very important for a doubly landlocked country like Uzbekistan. We have to cross two borders in order to go to the sea, and we are one of the only two countries in the world that has this issue, which means that our exports, not just Uzbek exports, but exports coming from the Central Asian region, is less competitive compared to those who have access to the sea. Now, we cannot move our geography, unfortunately. However, we can think of the ways of enhancing our cooperation with our neighbors, enhancing the connectivity, and ensuring that as a region we will benefit, all of us, from such cooperation. Number one, in the last 30 years of independence, Uzbekistan has been a key player in terms of ensuring transport corridors, whether it's rail roads or just automobile roads. We wanted to make sure that this connectivity is there, and even during the worst of the economic conditions, in 90s or late 90s, Uzbekistan continuously invested in its infrastructure, i.e. its railroads and motorways, especially those highways of international importance. Now, that's why after President Mirziyoyev's election in 2016 December, his main topic when it comes to international cooperation was enhancing international cooperation in Central Asian region. Central Asia, the countries in Central Asia, and of course Greater Caspian region is a priority countries when it comes to relationships, and trade and connectivity is, as you know, important part of this these relationships. And over the course of the last 5 years, I'll give you an example of how much our trade has increased between 2017 and currently 2020. Trade turnover between Central Asian countries almost doubled from $2.7 billion to $5.2 billion. Despite the impact of coronavirus pandemic, the Central Asian states trade remained stable. I said it did decrease from 2019, but it remained stable, which is also quite important. When all the borders are shut, air travel is restricted, then for necessary essential food and medical imports or exports, the regional trade mattered a lot to go through the worst of this crisis for the whole humanity. Now, let me very briefly mention several initiatives that Uzbekistan is quite keen to develop. First of all, transport corridors, north-south or west-east routes, very important. At the moment, Uzbekistan is promoting projects that will connect Central Asia by the shortest route through Afghanistan with Pakistan and the Middle East, and provide an opportunity for South Asian and Middle Eastern countries to enter the markets of CIS and Europe, and for us to move our goods to the shortest seaport that we have. So our initiative to build Mazar-e-Sharif, Kabul-Peshawar Railroad with access to Pakistani ports of Gwadar and Karachi is very, very important, and we are working with Russia, China, United States, and a number of international organizations, in particular World Bank, Asian Development Bank, EBRD, EIB, IDB, and AIB, to get the support for this project. And of course, the geopolitical situation in Afghanistan is a very important consideration. But however, there is an international support for this project. So if we do that, if this project is successfully implemented, transportation of goods from Pakistan to Uzbekistan or vice versa will take 3 to 5 days instead of 35 days currently. And the cost will reduce by 3 times. Another route that you already have seen is basically joint Central Asia and China initiative to build or to connect railroads. We have enormous potential to be a trade partner to move goods from Europe to China. Of course, majority of it goes through Kazakhstan, but at the moment we are discussing to build the routes through Kyrgyzstan, connecting China to Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and South of Asia. We also have another important is a cooperation with Caspian states, and we want to use transit opportunities of Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railroad, which will also help Uzbekistan and other Central Asian countries to diversify their transport routes. This project will play a key role in establishment of regular cargo shipments from Turkey and Europe to Central Asian countries and China. Last but not least, I just wanted to remind everyone of President Mirziyoyev's initiative when we hosted the international conference, Central Asia in the System of International Transport Corridors, Strategic Prospects and Unrealized Opportunities in Tashkent in 2018. This development of this strategy for the regional roads and transport corridors is very, very important for the whole trade flows and also logistics of Uzbekistan and Central Asian countries. Last but not least, financing of it, which Matt has raised. Financing is very important, and currently Uzbekistan, when it's fixing its infrastructure, working with international financial institutions, they're providing long-dated, cheap concessional loans. This is one way of financing, and the second way we are pushing towards using public-private partnership projects where private partner is coming with their own investments and helping us realize roads. And in this, we have 2 projects which we're currently developing, connecting Tashkent to eastern region, Fergana Valley, and Tashkent to central region, Samarkand. And of course, we look forward to discussing with our partners, with our neighboring countries in the Greater Caspian region to ensure our projects of common interest will get executed for the mutual benefit of everyone involved. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Deputy Minister. I know it's late in the evening in Tashkent, and we really appreciate your joining us. I will move directly to our next panelist. I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Arif Mamadov. Mr. Mamadov is the head of the Transport Policy Department at the Ministry of Transportation, Communications and High Technologies for the Republic of Azerbaijan. Mr. Mamadov, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I hope everyone hears me well. I greet you all and would like to start by thanking organizers Caspian Policy Center. It is a real pleasure to be among such distinguished panelists. Dear guests, Azerbaijan occupies a strategic position at the crossroads from east to west and from north to south. It is this strategic position that enables my country to aspire for the role of a logistics and transit hub in Eurasia. In order to leverage this geostrategic position, Azerbaijan's transport policy has been aimed at building a transport infrastructure to facilitate interconnection of the trans-European and trans-Asian transport networks, and thus offers the shortest and fastest connection between Asia and Europe. Thus, in line with this policy, over the past few years alone, Azerbaijan has invested billions of US dollars in its transport infrastructure. Thanks to these steps, Azerbaijan now ranks 27th worldwide for the quality of roads, 11th for the efficiency of railway services, and 12th for the efficiency of air transport services, according to the World Economic Forum. There are 6 international airports in Azerbaijan, including the Heydar Aliyev Airport, which was awarded with 5 stars in the category of regional airports by Skytrax. In October 2017, the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway was put into operation, connecting the Trans-European and Trans-Asian railway networks. With a throughput capacity of 6.5 million tons of cargo per year, the railway makes it possible to reduce the time of transportation between China and Southeastern Europe by 70%. In May 2018, the first phase of the construction of the new international sea trade port in Baku was completed. Today, the port's cargo capacity is 15 million tons per year, including 100,000 containers. The idea is that the location of the port at the intersection of the main directions of the transit cargo transportation should turn this port into a large logistics center for the entire region. And it is no coincidence that already in 2020, the cargo turnover of the Baku port has grown by 20%, with transit cargoes accounted for 87% of the total cargo volume. Moreover, with over 260 vessels at its disposal, Azerbaijan also owns the largest commercial fleet in the Caspian Sea. All in all, Azerbaijan has put a lot of efforts to build necessary infrastructure for the role of a logistics and transit hub, and this process continues nowadays. Dear colleagues, we all know that the coronavirus pandemic has inflicted huge damage to the entire global economy. The recovery and development of national economies in the post-COVID period will also depend on the efficiency of the transport sector. In this sense, the transport of Azerbaijan with its developed infrastructure provides a real backing for the development of the country's economy. Of course, as a country without access to the open sea, Azerbaijan cannot be content with only the development of infrastructure. In order to become a trans-regional logistics center, Azerbaijan has also been an active participant and sometimes an initiator of inter-regional and intra-regional transport corridors. These are mainly the east-west, north-south, and south-west corridors, which we think, against the background of billions of dollars in damage to the world economy as a result of the blockade of the Suez Canal by the ship Ever Given, have demonstrated the importance and attractiveness as an alternative to the sea route. Thus, the Ever Given crisis might have served as an additional impetus to divert the attention of world business to the alternative corridors offered also by Azerbaijan. East-West, North-South, and South-West corridors all offer shorter route for the delivery of cargo from China, India, and Persian Gulf to Europe. For example, delivery of goods from China to Europe along the East-West corridor takes only 10 to 12 days. Also, the launch of the East-West corridor was linked to the 1993 Traseka program. In 2015, Azerbaijan, together with its partners, gave new life to this corridor through the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route project. The corridor currently starts in China, passes through Kazakhstan, the Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, and extends to Ukraine, Bulgaria, and Romania. In 2020, despite all the difficulties associated with the pandemic, 8.4 million tons of cargo were transported through the East-West corridor. 2 other corridors have also shown positive trend in cargo transportation in 2020. Thus, having invested heavily in infrastructure, Azerbaijan, together with its partners, has created transport corridors with a huge potential. But these transport corridors are not only infrastructure projects. They also mean promoting free trade, exchanging technology and innovation, strengthening people-to-people contacts, and establishing mutually beneficial partnerships between countries along the corridor. They are true examples of interconnectivity. In this sense, we call on all our partners, including the private sector, to fully exploit the potential of the corridors. I would also like to emphasize that the sensitivity of landlocked countries to cross-border restrictions and border closures requires concerted action to ensure the sustainability of international trade and transport corridors. The pandemic has clearly demonstrated the importance of regional cooperation. For example, thanks to cooperation and coordination, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and the countries of Central Asia ensured an uninterrupted flow of supplies, which has vital importance, especially during the crisis. The post-COVID era will require closer regional cooperation, and in this context, regional integration mechanisms can play an important role. We must continue to work towards improving cross-border connectivity through integrated transport corridors. In this context, it is important to intensify our efforts to facilitate transit, digitalize transactions, and remove regulatory and procedural barriers to transport and trade. Dear friends, as reflected in the joint statement on the settlement of the Armenia-Azerbaijan Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, signed on November 10, 2020 by leaders of Azerbaijan, Russia, and Armenia, all economic and transport communications in the region are being restored. This means that a vital land corridor between Asia and Europe can be launched, which will strengthen the role of our region in trade, and Azerbaijan is already taking practical steps in this direction. Thus, the restoration and construction of roads, railways, and airports in the territories liberated by Azerbaijan is in full swing. On the one hand, the restoration of transport and economic communications paves the way for economic development and security in the region. On the other hand, this will contribute to the further development and expansion of the north-south and east-west transport corridors. We believe that this new reality has created new opportunities for development and cooperation, and we invite all of our partners to take advantage of these opportunities. The integration projects that Azerbaijan has so far initiated and in which it has actively participated are clear evidence of our interest and potential in expanding and deepening regional cooperation. Azerbaijan is always ready for mutually beneficial and fruitful cooperation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mamadov. We'll now move a short distance to the northwest from Baku to Tbilisi, and it gives me pleasure to introduce Ms. Ketevan Salikvadze. Ms. Salikvadze is the head of the Transport and Logistics Department of the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development of the Republic of Georgia. We're very glad to have you with us this morning in Washington.
Well, thank you, Mr. Edwards. It is my pleasure to be here. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, pleasure being here together with you to participate in this important session of the Trans-Caspian Forum dedicated to connectivity and infrastructure development. I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude to the organizers of this outstanding event for providing the opportunity to increase the visibility of the Trans-Caspian trade and transit corridor and discuss possibilities of deepening our cooperation across a broad spectrum of areas. Being part of various transport corridors and roads between Europe and Asia, including Trans-Saharan Middle Corridor, Lapis Lazuli, Black Sea, Caspian Sea Corridor, Georgia is well positioned to provide easy and wide access to key markets. The country's strategic geographic location, in combination with the free trade agreements reaching 2.3 billion consumers, creates an attractive environment for future investments. Hence, it comes as no surprise that improvement of transport connectivity through both hard and soft infrastructure development is among top priorities for the government of Georgia to further facilitate international trade and traffic flows. On the hardware side, let me highlight some transport infrastructure projects of Georgia that are of regional importance indeed. Despite the pandemics, we have managed to complete 70 kilometers of the East-West Highway in 2020. Construction of the remaining section continues without stopping. Nearly 95% of the works under the railway modernization project have already been completed. Apart from increasing the annual capacity of the main railway line from 28 million to 48 million tons, the project greatly contributes to increasing operational safety and reducing travel time. Baku-Tbilisi-Kars new railway line that was already mentioned by colleagues from different countries is another important rail project and a success story of regional cooperation. BTK line is operational in a pilot regime from 2017, which has already become an indispensable part of wider Europe-Asia transport corridor. Notably, freight volumes in the line, in this corridor are increasing steadily, namely by 89% in 2020 and by over 45% in January-April 2021. Development of the existing and new port infrastructure is key to harnessing Georgia's full maritime potential. Anaklia Deep-Sea Port remains a top priority project for the government of Georgia. We are going to announce a new tender on Anaklia Deep-Sea Port development in near future and hope to attract capable investors for the implementation of this important project. Moreover, a multifunctional marine terminal project is being implemented by Pace Group International at Potisi Port with the support of the United States International Development Finance Corporation, DFC. Ongoing Carbamid terminal project also at Batumi Seaport and Potisi Port expansion plan of APM terminals are also worth mentioning here. These and other infrastructure developments in the region shall significantly increase the capacity and competitiveness of our transit roads. Transport infrastructure projects are usually capital intensive, requiring mobilization of large investments, as you understand. As financial resources are limited, engagement of the private sector as well as international financial institutions is of utmost importance. Considering that we are particularly interested in the initiatives like Blue Dot Network, which aims at promoting quality infrastructure development across the globe through close multi-stakeholder cooperation. I must also mention here the extension of the Trans-European Transport Network to Georgia and other Eastern Partnership countries. TNT Investment Action Plan was elaborated to assist the countries in mobilizing necessary investments, both public and private, for implementation of the identified priority infrastructure projects across all transport modes. Apart from transport infrastructure, the government of Georgia attaches particular importance to the development of ferry feeder services on the Black Sea to improve connections with the EU and further contribute to Euro-Asian connectivity. Furthermore, new technologies and innovations can greatly help in developing more effective, efficient, and safe transport services and connections. We closely cooperate with the EU, financial institutions like the World Bank and the EBRD, and partner countries on digitalization of the transport sector and hope to deliver tangible results in the coming years. Importantly, Georgia is working to introduce single window principle at Georgian ports. This will increase the effectiveness of the Georgian maritime sector by eliminating bureaucratic hurdles. The feasibility study for the development of the maritime single window has already been completed thanks to the support of the US Embassy in Tbilisi and Export Control and Related Border Security Program. Next stage envisage software and hardware development. Let me also highlight unprecedented challenges caused by the COVID-19 that continue to hamper normal development. As we all see, the coronavirus outbreak has been a real test of our transport systems and supply chains. With close cooperation with our partners, we managed to avoid serious disruptions and maintain positive trend in road and rail freight transportation in 2020, as well as in 2021. More precisely, international freight volumes carried by road and rail grew by around 4.5% in Georgia in 2020. While in January-April 2021, international road and rail freight increased by 11.7% and 7.3%, respectively. Navigating through the coronavirus crisis and deep uncertainty, close cooperation is needed to proceed with our short and long-term connectivity goals. The previous joint efforts of trade and transport facilitation create a solid foundation for further development of regional and transnational shipments and attraction of more traffic flows. Once again, I would like to stress the importance of stronger partnership, including between governments and businesses, for building reliable and quality transport networks and ensuring faster post-pandemic economic recovery. Georgian side is ready for active engagement to better exploit the growth potential of the country and the entire region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Salikvadze. And we'll turn next back to Baku. I'd like to introduce the General Director of the Baku International Sea Trade Port, Mr. Taleh Ziadov.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. While we are going back to Baku, it turns out that I'm in Tbilisi. So it's always a pleasure to be back. This is my first visit out of this COVID situation in the last year and a half. And it's always a pleasure to be in Georgia. 2 days from now, we are going to inaugurate another important project in Batumi, which is a carbamide or fertilizer terminal, which was mentioned, which is an important gateway actually for Baku and for Central Asian fertilizer supply chain. So maybe I stick to some questions which was raised by Mr. Edwards in the email, which was regarding the short-term, long-term priorities, opportunities for the region, which are important, I think, for all of us. Connectivity, when we say connectivity, obviously the connectivity, the term itself is a very generic, but it certainly implies connecting something. And in the context of our it implies connecting infrastructure. Connectivity or the most successful connectivity actors are the ones that fulfill, in a way, a step-by-step implementation of it, which first entails connections within the country. So if any country that aims to connect itself to the world, they have to first solve their internal infrastructure issues, which means their roads, railways, ports, highways, motorways have to be brought to a particular standard. The next step, obviously, connecting these infrastructure with the neighboring countries, and in the context of landlocked countries, as most of our greater Central Asian countries are landlocked. So for us, connecting these infrastructure to our neighbors are of particular importance, and I would say of strategic importance. That's the next step. And the third step, which is coming up, is you are going to connect this infrastructure to your neighbors and to the world great economies. And in a way, as a follow-up of this, you are going to generate or select or create certain hubs locally that this entire network is going to feed. In a way, you are going to create, as in ancient Silk Road, certain engine of growth that is going to contribute to your local economies. So in this context, and whatever the projects that we are currently implementing, either in Baku, or in Central Asia, or in Georgia, are closely affiliated with diversification of your economy as a whole. So, for example, Port of Baku was mentioned. It was inaugurated in 2018, but the concept of port is not just a door. It is something beyond a door. It's a factor that is going to play in diversification of your non-oil economy. So we don't want just containers coming and passing through us. We want those containers to be opened up, certain value additions to be added, and then serving the markets that are within the proximity of your immediate markets, such as that within 1,000 kilometer radius, you have 130 million people that you can easily serve. And with the technology and developments that are taking place, I'm sure e-commerce is going to dominate, and the consumers would want their products to be delivered to their doorsteps in less than 24 hours, which implies you have to be very close to your final consumers, which means location is going to play a critical role. And then choice of that location will be dictated by the regulatory frameworks that are offered to the big logistic firms, to big international companies, to big investors. Hence, all these are the factors that are going to, in a way, influence the success of connectivity across the region. The good news that we are on the right track. I think all of us jointly, the region and all the countries, are moving in the right direction. With the inauguration of the port in Azerbaijan, we also saw inauguration of the port in Turkmenistan, another port in Kurik port in Kazakhstan. A new extension of Poti is ongoing. Anaklia was mentioned. The terminal that we are inaugurating soon in Batumi. All these things, obviously, and Baku Tbilisi cars, all these things are going to contribute largely to the transformation of the region as a whole, because these are, in a way, are the main blood vessels that are going to be connecting to a larger economies across Europe and Asia. And once they are in place, the next challenge, which is, Mr. Edwards, your second kind of question about foremost challenges, is how to make sure that these blood vessels are open and there is a seaming flow of the trade across them. And this is not an easy task. Obviously, if the question is you're moving one cargo from one part of your country to another, that could be regulated within the framework of your own country. But once you are crossing across multiple borders, sea borders and land borders, then it entails a larger cooperation, which means countries of the Greater Central Asia will have to work together to harmonize a number of things, which goes beyond just an infrastructure, which means customs, regulatory framework, and in the future, obviously, all this paperwork that currently is ongoing, this has to be digitized. So we have to, in a way, create a supply chain that is both green, but also digital. So this is the major, I think, major task that is standing ahead of us in the next decade. And I think this is one of the areas where actual American business could play a major role as well. Regarding the question about financing, as you know, the majority of infrastructure projects so far have been invested by the government. Azerbaijan has built its own port with its own finances. So is Kazakhstan, so is Turkmenistan. But I think from now on, and future trend is going to be involvement of the private companies for indirect investment. And most likely we are going to see what is currently what we call as a blended model, whereby there are certain investments coming in from abroad, but certain is also contributed locally. And this, in a way, creates a harmony in certain financial frameworks, basically. So I think this is going to be much more mixed model, whereby government still is going to help in certain areas, but a major role is also going to be opened to a private investor, foreign direct investors with experiences. And this is a key. It's not just we kind of want a private sector to come in or foreign direct investor to come in. It's also very much linked to expertise sharing, transformation of certain expertise. And without big logistic firms, big logistic expertise coming to the region, I think we will have quite a number of challenges in fulfilling that supply chain that I was talking about that goes across borders, across countries, and linking major markets across Europe and Asia. And finally, I just want to say that the future is certainly going to be oriented further on e-commerce, on much more efficient operations, and certainly a green component that has to be there. I'm happy to report that Port of Baku became a first green port in the region, and we are currently working with OECE in expanding this network to Central Asia, to Turkmenistan, and to our Kazakh colleagues. We work very closely with our Georgian partners as well, and I'm happy to hear about the single window, maritime single window. This is a very important thing because for us, the key of digital transformation or creating a digital seamless digital connection really entails to a ability of these ports to share the information. So currently we have this challenge, obviously. We have a port, what we call port community system. This is fully digitized, but we are not yet able to interconnect with our partners in Central Asia and further down to the east and also to the west. So our next challenge is going to make sure that we integrate these platforms so that when a container leaves someplace in, let's say, in Tashkent, we Georgians, Turks and Romanians, everybody already know about this upcoming container that is aiming for, let's say, Vienna or further down to Rotterdam. So these are the things that are ahead of us. I don't want to take too much of your time, but future is looking bright, and I look forward to contributing to this future together with our partners. Thank you.
Mr. Ziadov, thank you much. Thank you very much for those very thoughtful comments, and glad to see that you're a living example that business travel is resuming in the region. We're going to stick with the seaport area for perspectives, and we'd like to turn back over to a colleague of ours from Kazakhstan, Abay Turitpinbayev, the president of the Aktau International Commercial Seaport. Please.
Спасибо большое. Приветствую участников нашего форума Транскаспийского. Рад видеть старых знакомых. Хочу поблагодарить за предоставленное слово Мэтта Эдвардса и Хизер Бирнс. Я бы хотел дополнить своего коллегу Талиха Зиядова по нашему коридору. Как вы знаете, Казахстан является внутриконтинентальной страной, и она находится внутри континента Евразии, не имеющая прямых выходов к морю, но в определенном смысле имеющая свои, так скажем, преимущества, так как, находясь прямо в центре континента, через него проходят маршруты как восток-запад, так север-юг. И для страны, внутриконтинентальной страны, очень важное значение имеет, конечно же, те связи, маршруты, которые совместно делаются с соседними странами для более быстрой доставки грузов. И одним из таких маршрутов, безусловно, их несколько. Но один из самых важных, конечно же, это торговля по маршруту, который идет и обмен товарами между странами Юго-Восточной Азии, Китая, со странами Закавказья, Турции и Южной Европы. Безусловно, для того, чтобы эти маршруты работали, необходимо создание инфраструктуры, и правительство Казахстана в этом вопросе, конечно же, да, выделяет огромные деньги для того, чтобы эти маршруты построить. Так, за последнее время были введены новые терминалы на китайско-казахстанской границе в Харгосе. Был в северную сторону наш порт увеличен, то есть построен Актауский морской северный терминал, построен новый порт Курык, построены новые железные дороги, которые спрямляют наши пути с востока на запад. Также построена автомобильная трасса, это Западный Китай, Западная Европа. Безусловно, крупным маршрутом и более простым из Китая в Европу это является, конечно, маршрут сухопутный, который идет через Казахстан, Россию, Белоруссию и Западную Европу. Но второй маршрут, так называемый срединный маршрут, он, конечно, более сложный, мультимодальный, который пересекает море, Каспийское море. Но благодаря тому, что несколько лет назад была создана ассоциация Трans-Каспийский международный транспортный маршрут, в который вошли железнодорожные администрации Казахстана, Азербайджана, Грузии, Турции, Украины, морские порты, Актау, Курык, Баку, Поти. Уже сейчас участниками этого проекта являются более 20 компаний, они являются ассоциированными членами. И согласованная политика, тарифная политика, сами процедуры перехода границ. Забыл упомянуть, извиняюсь, также участником этого проекта является компания АСКА, это национальная азербайджанская компания. Вот Фархат Гулиев, я вижу, да, рад приветствовать вас. И в 2019 году впервые была запущена первая фидерная линия, регулярное контейнерное сообщение между Баку и Актау. Сейчас уже на этой линии на еженедельной основе уже двигаются уже два судна, то есть одно казахстанское, одно азербайджанское, что позволяет увеличивать скорость доставки. Именно скорость доставки груза из Китая в Европу и в Турцию является ключевым, так скажем, фактором. Это скорость доставки, это 14-17 дней, которые мы стараемся все соблюдать. Конечно же, есть, особенно на первом этапе были большие трудности. Но мы считаем, что сейчас уже на этом маршруте порядка 26-27 тысяч контейнеров прошло в 20-футовом эквиваленте. И каждый год на 20-30% растет объем этих перевозок. К сожалению, прошлый год, год пандемии, ковида, который очень сильно нас притормозил, когда у нас объемы должны были вырасти в разы, в 2-3 раза, но из-за пандемии они выросли всего лишь на 20-30%. Для кого-то это может быть результат хороший, но мы считаем, что это не совсем хороший результат. Есть, конечно, трудности, связанные с тем, что при том, что разные законодательства таможенные, еще пока полностью не оцифрован весь маршрут, это очень важно сделать, оцифровать весь маршрут, который позволял бы обмен данными, документами проводить в электронном виде, который бы позволил нам значительно уменьшить время доставки грузов. И об этом вот уважаемый мой коллега с Бакинского порта сказал. Между нашими портами Баку и уже в пилотном режиме уже действует, так скажем, цифровая связь, по которой мы ведем обмен информацией, и мы видим, что это очень хороший задел. теперь к этому присоединяются все остальные компании. И я надеюсь, в течение до конца этого года мы сможем уже, но это требует, конечно, больших усилий, но это стоит того. Также проблемами является это то, что все-таки наши страны именно в части контейнеризации перевозок сильно отстают от ведущих европейских стран, мировых тенденций. И понятно, что для этого понадобится время. И то есть именно контейнеризация всех процессов перевозок позволила бы, конечно же, наполнить этот маршрут более большим объемом. Наши казахстанские экспортеры только сейчас начинают переходить, рассматривать, и даже уже некоторые компании построили, особенно новые компании построили терминалы и используют уже этот вид транспорта как контейнеры. И сейчас мы даже, можно сказать, ощущаем нехватку этих контейнеров для того, чтобы загружать свой груз. Наш маршрут ТНТ, Трans-Каспийский маршрут, он, конечно, конкурирует с другими маршрутами. И тут очень важно взаимодействие наших сторон и, как скажем, быстрое решение. Зачастую вот последний год из-за пандемии некоторые наши встречи были сорваны, и ощущается все-таки недостаток общения, хотя мы проводим наши конференции в онлайн-режиме, через Zoom, через средства телевизионные, но все равно это не дает такого эффекта большого. Я бы хотел еще затронуть вопрос, как раз вот в начале нашего дискуссии говорили, что могут, какой вклад могут внести американские компании для наполнения этого маршрута. В нашей стране работают, да, большие нефтяные американские компании, которые раньше использовали маршрут, Транс-Каспийский маршрут для доставки своей нефти. Но с развитием трубопроводных маршрутов, конечно, вся эта нефть фактически ушла в эти трубопроводные маршруты. И фактически вот наши порты, которые традиционно нефть была одним из больших грузовых потоков, значительно уменьшилась, где-то даже обнулилась, если можно сказать. Мы призывали эти компании, это компания Chevron, ExxonMobil, чтобы они все-таки использовали наш маршрут, так как мы считаем, что использовать только один маршрут для доставки на мировые рынки, даже если это экономически более выгодно, то это все-таки создает определенные риски. И вот, к сожалению, вот этот наш транскавказский маршрут для нефти, он потихоньку умирает. То есть убираются терминалы, режутся и устаревают трубопроводы и резервуары. И в какой-то момент просто, если вдруг понадобится его восстановить, то это уже будет невозможно сделать. Потом вот для проекта Шеврона Тышова мы разработали маршрут для перевозки, безопасной перевозки серы на рынки, именно средиземноморские рынки. И вот как раз вот в Батуми запускаются терминалы, которые могли бы эту серу переваливать. И я думаю, что именно использование контейнеров, использование этого маршрута позволяет экологически безупречно сделать этот маршрут более безопасным и экономически эффективным. И хотел бы попросить Мэтта, чтобы он как-то нам посодействовал в этом вопросе. Мы сейчас в переговорной группе находимся, с компанией ТШО, и там сейчас как раз новое руководство. Я надеюсь, что мы все-таки убедим их в безопасности этого маршрута, в экономической его эффективности. То есть все пазлы сложены, и это может реально работать. Для нас, конечно, бы это была большая прибавка. Я не хочу много занимать вашей. Вот хотел еще раз поблагодарить за возможность выступить. Спасибо большое всем. Всех пожелать в наше непростое время. Всем здоровья.
Thank you very much. We will turn now to our next speaker. Let me invite Mr. Hiroyuki Suzuki. He is based here in Washington, D.C. as the Chief Representative of the Japan Bank for International Cooperation, and I think very well placed to address some of the questions concerning financing for these important projects.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. My name is Hiro Suzuki. I'm the Chief Representative of JBIC office in Washington, D.C. And JBIC, Japan Bank for International Cooperation, is a policy-based financial institution fully owned by the Japanese government. Our main purpose is promote Japanese companies' overseas activity, including investment and exports. And traditionally, we have the many track records in the Caspian region, such as petrochemical project in Turkmenistan and oil field and refinery project in Kazakhstan. So we are very much interested in the additional project of the energy-related value chain project in this region. And in addition to that, recently we noticed a trend of the importance of the decarbonization and the digitalization of the connectivity. So if the Japanese companies are involved in the project in this region, we are very, very positive to support from the early stage, because the key component, as previous panelists mentioned, that how to create the bankability is a very key component, and to mobilize private capitals from the investor side and the banker side, the appropriate PPP scheme is very important. So therefore, in some cases in Asia, we have the example of have the policy dialogue with the host country to create the bankable PPP scheme. So therefore, if you need such kind of the advice from the early states, we highly appreciate you to support such kind of the needs. And also, I would like to share with you that JBIC has a close communication with U.S. counterparts, U.S. Development Financial Corporation, USDFC, and we signed an MOU with the former OPIC 3 years ago. And at that time, our main focus was Indo-Pacific region. But this year, we renewed this MOU with new created DFC, and we expanded the focusing area from Indo-Pacific region to the global wide. And in addition to the energy-related infrastructure, we are very focusing on the data connectivity also. And we have the track record of supporting the Japanese companies' data business in Uzbekistan. And we have the recent transaction in Palau to support the subsea cable project. So we would like to expand our support, not only energy-related projects, but also the other social infrastructure projects. So therefore, if you have the interest in the JBIC support and the support from the Japanese company, please reach out to me. And also we have the representative project in Istanbul, and also the Moscow. So jointly, we would like to develop the conversation with this region. And in addition to the core cooperation with USDFC, I'd like to say that we have also the close communication with other development financial institutions, such as EBRD and the EIB. And also we have the MOU with the Turk Exim Bank. So such kind of the coordination with the other DFI is we understand it's very important. So we would like to develop the conversation in accordance with your needs from the host government. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Suzuki. Very much appreciate your remarks. We have two additional speakers to whom I'd like to give the floor. First I will turn to is the Deputy Chairman of the Azerbaijan-Caspian Shipping Company, Farhad Guliev.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank Caspian Policy Center for organizing this forum and inviting us to participate. It's already 5th year, and we hope to next year it will be again in Washington as it was the first 3 times. I think this subject was, like it was mentioned many times today, connectivity. And it's a key subject for development of transportation in Trans-Caspian region now. The investments in infrastructure during the last, I would say, 2 decades was really huge. There was multi-billion investments in every country. And if we sum them total, it will be definitely hundreds of billions investments. So for today, the key development is connectivity. It may sound easy, but in fact, given the number of countries, number of borders, number of jurisdictions that the cargo flows, it becomes a bit challenging. And if you add to this the change in mode of transportation, railways, terminals, ports, and then sea transportation, and even with railways, you have to switch between different widths of tracks, railway tracks. So that creates a lot of challenge. The transportation across this route, I would give you the date, started in 1962. That's the date when the first ferry started transportation between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan. So of course it was developing during the last, it's already almost 60 years. But the first improvement in connectivity is definitely needed. And the contribution, like it was mentioned today several times, what would be the contribution, what would be the financing? I do not think that it would be a huge investment, like compared to investments that was made during the previous years. But it's rather the experience of American companies, private companies has in building such infrastructures, I mean soft infrastructures, in order to ensure smooth flow of cargoes, and of course paying more attention to this corridor, because if we again date back to 20-30 years ago, this route was mainly used to transport cargoes from Caucasus to Central Asia and from Central Asia to Caucasus. But now the importance of the route is improving, and there is much more attention to this route from Europe, China, America, United States. So with improvement, with more attention, there are more competitive routes that was mentioned today many times. It's not only like sea route, but as well as land routes, which can go through Russia or to the south or to the north of the Caspian Sea. So the improvement of efficiency, improvement of speed is key in promoting this corridor. We think that, like I will stop and I will be ready to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Guliev. And for our final word, I'll give the floor to Mr. Victor Kipiani. Victor comes to us from the perspective of one of the most esteemed think tanks in the region, GeoCase of Georgia. So, Mr. Kipiani, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting, and thank you to the Caspian Policy Center. It's my pleasure to provide the distinguished panel and the audience with a few highlight observations. And if I may start with highlighting what the priorities are. And the priorities from my perspective, but quite often when we speak about the investment project, we speak about bankability, we speak about unifying tariffs or harmonizing rules, etc., etc. But from my perspective, and obviously I would not be inventing a bicycle, the key challenges which the region and the broad region is facing is regaining or gaining a new trust and credibility. I think, these are the most challenging objectives which we all should unite our efforts and combine our efforts. And this is indeed something, which is a win-win game. And I don't believe that any single country could accomplish to the largest extent, all the benefits which the region provides if it's not united in its efforts, in its political will, in its capacity, etc., etc. So again, to underline the trust and credibility, especially in this extremely competitive global business environment, is something, which brings us all on the same page, regardless of differences in political regimes or in foreign policy trajectories, etc., etc. So this is the most unifying driving force. And we have very good examples of accomplishing grand objectives. If we go back to the last century and recalling ourselves and the audience about the massive successes which BTC had and has, or South Caucasus pipeline. So these are the clear examples, how we could all be united, by the same efforts and by the single goal. So what the opportunities are? I think the opportunities are also immense. And these opportunities, primarily, they relate to the geopolitics of the region. And this the importance of the geopolitics is on the increase. For various reasons, gentlemen, the region is even bigger today in its geopolitical and geo-economical significance than if judged only by its geographical definition. It's not just a huge patch of land. It's the network of interconnections and interconnectedness and interdependency, which is at the intersection of various transport and energy routes from north to south, east to west. But what is also important that it's a very meaningful safety link of the two largest regions. One is that of the Eastern Europe, and another is the Middle East. So therefore, I think that the wider, the broader Caspian region has not just a business purpose, but extremely, hugely important security and geopolitical purpose as well. Besides, when we're discussing the opportunities, I think that we should be on alert in expectation of redesigning the global supply chain. And I think that in that respect, we all should again work with concerted efforts to reach out for those new opportunities which could fall onto the region as a result of redesigning the global supply chain. The next chain of opportunities which I would highlight from my side is the very important agreements on delineation of the Caspian seabed. And I think that that agreement provides all of us with extremely interesting opportunities of tapping and designing new regional mega projects. Last but not least, when we speak about the opportunities, I would remind the audience about using the potentials of C5+1 to the fullest extent possible, and bridging those potentials of C5+1 with the potentials which Georgia offers to the region due to its special trade regime with European Union. So I think that all in all, as I've said in the beginning of my speech, this is extremely and very promising and very encouraging the win-win game. A few words about the challenges. Again, not to invent a bicycle. Those challenges are multiple, but let me just emphasize very principal challenges and very key challenges. The first challenge is that the region is still in the conditions of transitional political environments, which also relates to the fragility of its institutions. Last but not least are the so-called frozen conflicts or pseudo-conflict, ethnic conflicts, which are essentially geopolitical conflicts. And those geopolitical conflicts are a very handy leverage in the hands of various rouge regimes or revisionist states to instigate, manipulate, and force the region to depart from the rule-based order, as well as limiting a free choice of a sovereign nation. Even though it's more important to beef up the region with the Western presence. And I should admit that there is some perception or probably misperception that over the last period of time, the region became a bit devoid of Western robust business and political presence. So I think that that perception should be changed. And we're in expectation of more explicit political, security, and investment decisions and actions. To conclude my speech or my presentation, when we speak about the source of funding, because of risky environments, I believe that the key drivers for improving the businesses on the ground still are IFIs and development institutions in the first place. This, just speaking realistically, the state actors or the state-owned the entities which could take more risk on their shoulders, then could be followed by private funds. And even then, those private funds or private enterprises have to be navigated, facilitated, or backed up strongly from state stakeholders. And when we speak about investment injections and direct investments, of course, the role for businesses from the United States is indeed very critical. It's decisive and has a true multiplying effect. It is specifically important when we speak about, and my colleagues on the panel, they mentioned developing and upgrading Georgian maritime transport infrastructure. We're expecting a decisive say of US investors and US investments in that respect. But I should end up, my presentation with again emphasizing and highlighting that doing business in the region, it's not just about businesses per se. It's about sending a clear message to the region where various regional powers are tackling with each other for a soft power dominance. So therefore, I believe that in the context of the region, in the context of the broad Caspian region, the source and nature of businesses is not just about investing models or the cash flows, but it's about bigger picture, it's about much higher and more sensitive stakes. So I fully share that the observations which were made by previous presentators and speakers, that more interconnectedness, more interdependency, but more presence of the Western interest in the region ensures, to the largest extent possible, healthy business environment, safety, security, and prosperity for all the countries in the region. Thank you very much indeed, and pleasure to share with you my thoughts and my observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kipiani. And your point is well taken regarding the importance of a robust Western presence, and was pleased to see the recent visit of a delegation from the U.S. Congress to the region, and hope that that we'll see more as people are able to resume traveling. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and for sticking with us. I know that we have run past our time heading into this session. I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative to field one question that's come in. This is from Admiral Ron McLaren of the Caspian Policy Center. And his question is, we talk of connectivity, we keep mentioning it, but do the regional countries have plans to form any kind of a working council to work this connectivity issue? Maybe that is a question that I could direct to our government colleagues from perhaps Georgia or Azerbaijan, if there are any thoughts on that.
Let me take on this question. I thank Canterbury for the very good question. Actually, all the countries in the region are indeed engage in various forums and discuss these connectivity issues and raise these problems which we have, and try to align our policies to coordinate our actions so that we have a real interconnectivity in our region. If we, let's say, there are various levels in, where we discuss our connectivity problems and discuss our projects, our steps to move forward. For example, one level is, as mentioned by our distinguished colleague from Kazakhstan, is the Trans-Caspian, let me take its name, Trans-Caspian International Transport Route Project, where different companies from our respective countries are engaged in, and they discuss of introducing one window system, one tariff over the route, and then we have also bilateral commissions where we discuss our problems, our projects and issues with respective countries' representatives. At the same time, we have regional mechanisms where we discuss all the problems and all the solutions to the interconnectivity issues with our regional partners. So I would say that when it comes to working group format or councils, let's say, we have different formats of cooperation, and we are currently we are very satisfied with this level of cooperation with our regional partners. Let's say our colleagues from Georgia, Mr. Kipiani talked about the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway project is a real success story and shows that all regional countries are interested in deepening our cooperation and solving the problems which we have when it comes to interconnectivity. And if let's say, if there will be, let's say, any need to establish a new format of cooperation, I think all countries in the region, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, we all be ready to establish such a format and discuss our problems and find the solutions. From our perspective, so far so good. It's not easy because these transit routes, corridors pass so many countries with different procedures, but we are doing our best. But of course, there is a room for improvement. And from our government side, and I think I would speak on behalf of the governments of Kazakhstan and Georgia and others in these corridors, that these problems are discussed and solutions are found. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mamadov. And realizing that we are over time, I will turn the floor back now to Yevgan Nifty of the Caspian Policy Center. Before I sign off, I just want to thank again each of our panelists. Thank you for staying on late in your work days and for sharing your perspectives. There's been so much information that I think has been useful and informative, some very thoughtful remarks which bear following up on. And Yevgan, I understand that the Caspian Policy Center is willing to help relay some additional questions so that there can be some additional dialogue and networking between the attendees and our panelists. And I think that's a tremendously useful function that the center can play. Yevgan, over to you.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you for your organization's support for this event and for this forum. And thanks for all the speakers for being patient and waiting for the session to start. I know we had some technical issues, and also then we had the first session taking over our time for the second panel. Once again, thanks everyone for joining this panel, and just please make sure to join us again tomorrow, all the attendees, for our third and fourth sessions, which will be on the energy security, sustainability, and also fostering innovation in the Caspian region. To access panels tomorrow, please use the links you have received for panel 3 and panel 4 when you registered. The third panel will start tomorrow at 9 a.m. US time. And again, all the attendees, thanks for your patience and being part of this event today. And I very much look forward to going into the issues of energy security and innovation tomorrow in tomorrow's sessions. Once again, on behalf of the Caspian Policy Center, thanks everyone for today's sessions and all the speakers and our moderator.